Scariest and creepiest non-supernatural experiences. Hi everyone, Em here. Please enjoy today's video and leave a comment if you have your own story to share. Story 1. I was 18 or 19 at the time, and I had just finished making dinner at the family home. It's outside Sequoia National Park, and it's built right up on the river. The kitchen overlooks said river, and it was summer, so the water was flowing, and it's loud as hell. I had just dished up some food and was about to walk to the other side of the house when I just barely heard my mom yell. I looked out the window to see her in the river, on the other side of the dam, absolutely pouring blood out of her head. I ran down there and practically jumped in. On that side of the dam, it's about 6 feet down from the paved walk above it. The river is only about thigh deep on that side. So I don't know how I didn't break my legs jumping down. She kept repeating, "I think I broke my arm," over and over, and I was terrified she had brain damage. My best friend, who was the only other person at the house with us, happened to come to the kitchen and saw us down there and came running out. I had to scream over the sound of the river for her to call an ambulance. I don't know how the hell I did it, but I somehow hauled my mom's butt out of the river and pushed her by her butt cheeks up onto the walk above and climbed the 6 feet up out of the river myself. My mom is not a small lady, and I am not a very strong chick. So I guess adrenaline helped me out with that stuff. My mom is on a blood thinner, so she just keeps bleeding when she's cut. I tore the dress I was wearing off and held it to her head to stave off the bleeding. The ambulance got there really freaking fast for the nearest hospital being 45 minutes away. She did in fact break her elbow as well as crack her head and had to have 10 staples in her scalp. No concussion or brain damage though, thankfully. She was collecting rasps and floaties from the side of the river to be put away when she lost her footing on a bridge over the dam and fell headfirst straight onto a rock. That was one of the most terrifying things I've ever experienced, seeing my mom sitting in the river gushing from her head. If I hadn't heard her then in the kitchen, I definitely would have heard her from the other side of the house, and she probably would have bled out. That experience in watching United 175 fly to the World Trade Center on live television, while believing my dad was on it. He was flying out of Logan Airport in Boston and had upgraded his flight to United 175, or so we thought, because he said he was going to, would be my most terrifying experiences. Adrenaline is one hell of a drug, and can take, honestly, the most normal of us and make us into superhumans. I'm happy to hear OP was able to get their mom out though. It's incredibly lucky that OP's mom didn't have any long-lasting damage, and that OP somehow didn't break their legs when they jumped in. Story 2. About 1 year ago, I was geocaching with my girlfriend and her daughter. The cache was located in the middle of the woods in an old place used for Celtic rituals. There was a really old lady sitting on a chair in the middle of said place, seemingly praying or something. Well, she didn't move, not in the slightest. I wasn't sure if she was real or just a doll that was put there by some teenagers as some sort of prank or something. Or maybe she needed help. So I decided to check her out. When I was really close to her, maybe 2 meters or so, she slightly moved her hand, but I still couldn't see her face properly. Okay, that lady just wants to be left the freak alone and do whatever she was doing in peace, I thought. So I decided to continue my search for the catch. That thing was very well hidden, so we spent a lot of time looking for it. The whole time I had that strange feeling you have when someone is watching you. That lady didn't watch. She was staring. I could feel it. But every time I turned around, she pretended that she hadn't just pierced us with her cold, crazy eyes. My girlfriend and her daughter afterwards said that they had the same feeling, but at the moment, I thought that we were just really pissing her off. We continued our search and finally found the gosh darn box. Then we noticed that the old lady was gone. Not a single sign of her. But we had a good overview. There weren't that many trees and bushes. I mean, it was really unlikely that we didn't see or hear her leave, since less than 2 minutes ago, we saw her sitting on that chair. Anyways, we signed the catch and decided to take a small break and eat something before heading back home. After that, we saw her again going through the woods with her folding chair in her arms. She was moving fast for her age, like really fast. We saw her a couple of times, always a few dozen meters away from us until we left the woods. I mean, it was not that special or scary at all, and there are some logical explanations for that. But at that point, that lady scared the hell out of me, and still to this day, I can sometimes feel her cold, empty eyes staring at me. I know that this thread asked for non-paranormal stuff, but this reads as kind of paranormal to me. Maybe this lady was just crazy fast, but her speed and quietness makes me think that maybe something else was going on. Either that or she really was just a cranky old lady. Story 3. Holy crap, easily the night my youngest daughter, then 18, and I were leaving my parents' house, and I nearly caused her death. There's a gate at the end of my parents' long driveway. I put my vehicle in park, so I thought, and got out to close the gate. I suddenly heard my daughter yelling for me and saw that my car was rolling toward the highway. I could see the glow of headlights approaching to the right of us, and I started screaming for her to get out as I ran toward her, thinking I'm either ripping her out of that car or we are dying together. I can't even describe this well enough to convey how quickly it happened, or how freaking terrifying it was. As I was trying to sprint toward my daughter, I hit the ground. I was back on my feet quicker than I knew I had the power to move. That's when I saw my daughter was already out of the car. I started screaming for her to run along the side of the road in the direction of the oncoming car. I was fully anticipating flying debris in a fireball. I wanted her as far away from the impact as possible. The car must not have seen mine. They never slowed down. As my runaway car crossed the highway, I swear it looked like they passed through each other. My driver's side door was still open, and I was able to run across the road, get in, and stop my car before it hit a tree on the other side. I saw that I'd only moved the shifter to neutral. Once it was over, I realized how crazy the sequence of events played out. If I hadn't fallen, my time in getting to my girl would have screwed her up getting out. Had she panicked and become entangled in her seatbelt, she would have been dragged into the road. Had that car seen mine and tried to slow down, that would have hit mine. Had I shut my door when I got out, I wouldn't have been able to stop my car. Once it was over, I was shaking so badly I couldn't drive. My daughter burst into hysterical laughter and said, "I could have died." When I felt cooled off enough to drive again, I was going way too slowly. We rode the rest of the way home in silence. First, as we normally have loud music playing. Jeez, OP, I think you cashed in on every single miracle you had stored up to save your daughter and yourself. I can't imagine the fear that was going through both of you. Probably just the terrifying thoughts running through your head. It's amazing that everything turned out okay. But here's hoping you learn to always double check what gear your car is in. Story 4. When I was like 13, I'm 22 now, I went on a river trip down the Grand Canyon. My mom and pops were both river guides, and my dad had 30 years experience at the time. I had gone down plenty of times, but we had won the trip in some raffle from the company my parents used to work for, so he went. My dad took turns with the actual guide during the 7-day trip and even gave him some pointers going through Pacific Rapids, turbulent water caused by large rocks in the water. All was well, until my mom took over for the rapid that was her specialty, lava falls. For those of you that don't know, lava falls is a Class 5 rapid in the Grand Canyon, and often regarded to be one of the most dangerous rapids in the world. Many rafts have been flipped and people killed over the years. However, in the hands of an experienced god, it can usually be passed through with moderate difficulty. Halfway through the long rapid, everything was fine. Then, all of a sudden, the front of the raft caught an eddy, which is water moving in the opposite direction, and lurched the boat to the side. I got tossed from the raft. I saw my life flash before my eyes, and as a last-ditch effort, I reached out and grabbed whatever I could. That happened to be the burlap sack holding our empty cans hanging off the side of the boat. I saw my mom's face in absolute horror as the guide took over. I held the bag with every ounce of strength I could muster for the rest of the rapid. I smacked my knees and chest pretty hard on multiple rocks. That caused some moderate cuts, but I made it to the end. My mom grabbed me by the life jacket and hoisted me out of the water. For reference, my mom was like 135 pounds at 5'6", and I was like 5'9", 165 at that point. She wrapped her arms around me and held me for like 5 minutes. We were both absolutely terrified. They dressed my cuts, and I ended up with some gnarly bruises. Rest of the trip was painful but fun. Gave me a decent story though. Story 5. So far, everything that's happened to me has been natural, and I don't expect that to change. I was on a hell flight over the Himalayas. Small aging prop plane with maybe 20 seats, canvas strap sort of holding the door closed, which I sat next to. I could see the ground beneath through the cracks. Flew into a thick cloud where we were planning to land. Pitch black inside. Plane was tossed about like a toy. No idea which way is up. Pilot shouting, revving engine noises. Pretty sure we're gonna smack into the jungle floor and die. Probably be eaten by crocodiles. Stewardess was crying and begging the pilots to turn around. They did. We flew home to Kathmandu, an extremely ridiculously bumpy ride, but a relaxing day poolside with umbrella drinks compared to Hell Cloud. One Nepalese guy was having a great time. Everyone else was in shock or throwing up, calling friends and families to relate their near-death experience. I asked the guy if he'd ever been in anything like that before. Nope. First time flying on an airplane. Landed like a 5-star hotel. 5 Bloody Marys, did nothing at all, but relaxed at the hotel for 3 days. Then I hopped a bus to my destination. Nearly died on that trip as well. Finally, we made it to our destination, and a wild elephant was running wild in the village. The villagers were running for their lives to get behind 20-foot walled compounds. A few oblivious tourists had to be told they were probably about to die by a furious elephant if they didn't take shelter. That was a great trip. Remind me not to go on vacation with this guy. He sounds cursed. But yeah, when OP mentioned the dude who was living it up, that probably shocked me the most. I know I would have probably been pooping my pants, not pretending it was a roller coaster. Story 6. Back in 2004 in Brooklyn, Michigan, my mom and I were parked at a gas station so she could use the payphone. Her cell was a shitty track phone and the minutes were used up. She went to get out of the car and then suddenly slammed the door closed and locked it. We both watched as a lanky-looking dude walked across our view and into the gas station. My mom waited and tried not to look too concerned, but I could tell she was scared. Once the dude came out of the gas station, he looked me dead in the eyes and then back to my mom. He slowed as if he was waiting for us to come out of the car. My mom turned over the car and acted like she was backing out but didn't move. Once the dude completely disappeared out of our view down the street, she turned to me and said, if I ever feel in my gut to stay away from someone, always trust it no matter where you are or who it is. The next night we were eating dinner and my dad was watching the local news. It showed a mugshot of the same guy from the gas station. And the story was that he'd been arrested for R-wording 2 19-year-old girls the night before. One of them had their face beaten in while trying to help her friend from being attacked. I'll never forget the look on my mom's face. She threw up her dinner and it took my dad a while to calm her down. I was 7 or 8 at the time, and every time I think about it to this day, I get the strongest wave of chills. My mom saved my innocence and probably both of our lives. One of those things that we don't talk about, not because we're afraid that we won't be believed, but because my mom still gets choked up about it. Story 7. When my parents split up, my dad used to pick me up after school to spend time with him, and my half-siblings used to stay with him. One of my sisters had this boyfriend that was just useless. One weekend, my dad picked me up and we got to his apartment. When we walked inside, there were random people inside drunk. It kind of scared me because I didn't know them and I was still in school. Well, as I was on my dad's computer, I heard my sister getting mad at her ex. I don't know about. My dad went to see what was going on. I hate fights and arguing, but as a kid, I wanted to see what was going on. I went to see my dad and her ex on a hold from behind. Her ex got a knife and started to swing and hit my dad. I started crying and ran upstairs. There was so much blood. They called the cops and the ambulance. Of course, the ex ran off. But my sisters went to take care of my dad. The cops showed up because I could hear them bust through the door, yelling, and I heard them come up the stairs. When they opened the door, one cop pointed a rifle at me and asked if I was the only one. I said, yeah, I was crying. The ambulance came and took my dad. He survived, but they had to pull out a warrant for her ex. That was so traumatizing. I never forgave my sister for that because she never got rid of that boyfriend of hers. Even though he was abusive towards her. Even after that, she still crawled back to him. Eventually, she got tired of him and left him. But I almost lost my dad that day. Story 8. One day I was fine. I was 20 and had stomach pain and back pain. I thought that with the physical job and the bad diet and stress I had in my life at the time, it was normal. My mom looked at me one night and brought me to the ER. Left me there because we had to wait a long time and I could take a ride home afterward. I was waiting outside smoking weed. I was totally okay. Then a nurse stormed out of the hospital, asked me, "Hey, are you Mr. X?" Like losing her crap. So yes, it's me. She grabbed my arm, bringed me inside, telling me, "How the freak can you still be standing? Don't you feel like you have a hard time breathing?" I'm like, WTF, there must be a mistake. Turns out I had really advanced pancreatitis. She was right. I was out of breath really fast. Lately, and if I hadn't showed up in the next 24 hours, it was over for me. The luck I had was obviously my mom. But lucky and unlucky, I really didn't feel that much pain. And another kid my age had the same and without morphine. He was weeping hard. So no morphine for me. Never underestimate your mom's instinct. Note, I was partying hard at the time. This incident changed my life. 4 months later, I left my parents from France and moved to Canada. and started living in a healthier way. The absolute gall of this dude to start smoking weed after going to the hospital for mystery pain. I'm sure that nurse had one hell of a time telling everyone about him. Story 9. The time I overdosed on meth and started hallucinating, culminating in a complete psychotic break. I heard my neighbors plotting to kill me, heard them load a shotgun and get into a car. I ended up running for my life down the street thinking every plane, helicopter, vehicle was shooting at me. This wasn't some silly shroom trip. This was real. I had no ability to distinguish reality at all. There were voices, evil voices, as realistic as any ever heard, constantly plotting to hurt me. Impossible to ignore, even though I knew I was on drugs. They were not only gonna kill me, but frame me for horrible crimes. So all of my friends and family would abandon me. It was my literal worst nightmare coming true. But what I can only describe as a miracle after sprinting through an open field for a mile, dodging imaginary bullets. The first person I ran into was a friend who took care of me for several days until the psychotic symptoms wore off. I never touched meth again. The scariest part is realizing what I might have done while in that state. Had I run into a stranger instead of a friend, I could have seriously hurt them in my delusional self-defense. You want to try drugs? Go ahead. Just please, not meth. Story 10. Almost got mauled by a police dog during a training exercise. I was supposed to hide in an office building after hours, and it would sniff me out as an alert. The officer told me to hide in the restroom and prop my foot against the base of the door so the dog couldn't get in. So I got into position. I step inside, turn around, and realize that the door swings out, not in. There's no handle on the inside to pull it closed either. And then I hear him release the dog. Quick thinking, I took my bag off, opened the door, and slipped the strap around the handle on the outside and pulled it closed. The dog finds me immediately and manages to grab the strap and pull. And so commences the worst game of tug-of-war I've ever played in my life. The dog pulls the door open. We lock eyes. He lets go and lunges, and I pull the door closed just in time. Rinse, repeat. The officer is trying to call him off, but has no control. He finally wrestles the dog away in a walkout with heart palpitations and a shredded handbag and a big freak you. Never again. Story 11. I was hanging out with my best friend at their parents' house. They had a couple big recreational vehicles, RVs, that they would take camping regularly. One day we were hanging out in his driveway, about to smoke weed, and I asked if he had a lighter. Not on me, but there should be one in the RV if you want to check. I walk into the RV and see a lighter placed on a table that's near the back. I grab it, and as I'm turning around to leave, I see a face peeking out from a cupboard that was partially open. I act like I didn't notice anything and quickly leave. At first, I thought maybe it was a toy or a shadow, but I still tell my friend I swear I saw a homeless person hiding in your RV. Turns out there were 2 drug addicts hiding in there. They used to be a family friend and somehow convinced his younger brother to let them stay there. Luckily, they weren't violent and left shortly after. That moment of seeing an unexpected face staring back at me while in the RV was quite unsettling. These people are a lot smarter than me, because I probably would have run out of there screaming and crying my head off. Happy to hear that they weren't violent though, and that no one got hurt. Story 12. Our family had a cherry tree in our backyard when I was about 7 years old. My sister and I, as well as our other friends in the neighborhood, would play on it like it was a small jungle gym. We would climb it almost every day in the summer and swing off the branches. My father even trimmed the slash and saw the ends off so it'd be easier for us to swing from. One day during spring, I was bored and decided to climb the tree solo for a quick swing while it was blossoming. Little did I know the base of the tree where the branch was attached had slowly begun to run a bit on the inside and couldn't bear the weight of a small child anymore. The whole branch broke from the base as I swung. All I recall was a loud crack sound and a bunch of sticks hitting me in the face. Luckily, I landed just beside the full weight of the massive chunk of tree and went to tell my mom what had happened. Sometimes I think about what could have happened had it fallen on me. Story 13. Other than many childhood traumas and abuse stories I could share, one that still keeps me up at night was when I was crawling in a Burger King playhouse alone in my rural hometown. Nobody was in there but me, as my grandma was on the phone outside having a cigarette, and a short-staffed kitchen were all on the other side in a separate room. So a little 6-year-old girl crawled inside the big playhouse and turned around the corner and crawled up to the big slide where the big yellow X's and O's were for tic-tac-toe, and an older man who looked to be homeless was sitting there waiting for me. Unfortunately for him, I'm a big intuition kind of child and immediately booked it behind me and threw myself off that thing like nobody's business, and his body was too big to go that fast. I ran out of the Burger King to my grandma. but she wouldn't listen to my story. Some crazy crap. Story 14. One Saturday in October of 2014, when I was 14, I suddenly felt weird, kind of tingling numb with a metallic buzzing in my ears. It went away before long, but it creeped me out. In early January, on the way to the school bus, I had the same feeling, except this time the metallic buzzing was accompanied by the faint sound of a voice. The voice was a very solemn-sounding man's voice, speaking in a kind of formal way, as if delivering a eulogy. The feeling passed after a few moments, but it was creepier than the last time. A few weeks later, I had seizures, and learned those earlier encounters were many seizures. However, that still doesn't explain why I heard a eulogy. I had several more of those many seizures and never heard anyone talking during any others. So a lot of people who experience seizures have some type of hallucination that comes along with them, whether it be olfactory, visual, or even auditory. It sounds like this guy probably was experiencing a similar auditory hallucination. Super scary, but at least it can be assuring that it has an explanation. Story 15. Driving across a lengthy bridge at a high speed one fine day. There's an excavator shovel and a flatbed trailer ahead. This thing is huge, though about the size of a Volkswagen Beetle, but probably weighs 5 to 10k pounds, and the cargo control chains begin to loosen. Then it slipped off the bed and began spinning like a top on the pavement, careening and bouncing back from one side to another. I am 2 cars back. It takes out this compact that was ahead of me, demolished with debris everywhere. It bounces off the left-hand barrier, so I point at the car hoping that by the time I get to that spot, it'll have bounced to the right. It worked, no damage to my car, and unbelievably, no flat tires. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.